Welcome to General Biology. Today's video is going to be on invasive species of Michigan. So invasive species by definition are species that are non-native and they cause harm to the ecosystem. So normally they don't live here. They get brought here usually by humans, either on purpose or on accident, and they end up causing harm to the ecosystem. So this was not on purpose. Zebra mussels were brought in on ballast of huge ships. So these ships come from the ocean, and when they come from the ocean, they have water that's inside huge tanks inside these ships, and these ballast tanks get dumped in the Great Lakes, and then people take their boats in the Great Lakes and then they put them into smaller lakes. And so the zebra mussels get spread around in that way. They will start to grow on the sides of boats. And a lot of times people will have their boat on a pier in the marina, maybe on Lake Michigan or a lake connected to Lake Michigan. And the zebra mussels are able to grow on those boats as they're sitting in the marinas. And then when people put them on a trailer and take them to inland lakes, you end up spreading the zebra mussels from one location to another. Zebra mussels are bad because they eat all the zooplankton in the environment. And if they consume all the zooplankton, then there's nothing left for minnows. If there's nothing left for minnows, then you can't have larger fish eating minnows, and so pretty much what happens is your fish populations in these lakes dwindles down to nothing. Another invasive species that hit in the last 20 years is an organism called the emerald ash borer. The emerald ash borer is a small insect. You can see it here on a penny, so it's pretty small. And it bores into the side of ash trees, and then it lays its larvae. Well, the only living part of a tree is directly underneath the bark is something called the cambium. And the emerald ash borer's larvae get into that cambium, and they start eating their way back and forth underneath the tree, which pretty much kills all the living tissue that connects the bottom where the roots are to the top of the tree. So it pretty much kills the tree. We lost almost every single ash in Michigan disappeared in the last 20 years. This is another one that's been really invasive for the last 50 years, but really bad for the last 20 or 30 years. It's called purple loosestrife. People brought this to America because they thought it was really pretty and they could grow it in their gardens. But it does really, really well in wetland environments. And when it gets out in wetland environments, it outcompetes all of our native species. And what happens is our wetlands end up looking like this, where it's pretty much just huge wetland areas of purple loosestrife. We have tried to defeat this purple loosestrife with a European beetle that actually loves to eat purple loosestrife, and we've actually reduced the amount of purple loosestrife significantly in Michigan. This is another invasive species called the Asian carp. This is in a river down in Illinois. It hasn't officially got into the Great Lakes yet, but this river connects directly to the Great Lakes, and so this might be very soon a major invasive species into our Great Lakes. Asian carp are not good to have around because they reproduce super fast and they eat all the fish that trout and salmon would eat, and so they outcompete, and you end up with no trout and salmon left in your Great Lakes. This is a lamprey eel. The sea lamprey is a kind of a nasty fish that bites onto the side of other fish and basically sucks blood and nutrients from the other fish. We've been trying to get rid of these guys for 30 or 40 years. They have significantly reduced and injured and had a major effect on our trout, rainbow and lake trout, and the salmon populations that are in the Great Lakes. They have a nasty mouth. You can see they have rings of teeth that they sink right into the side of the fish, and that's how they hold on. And then they get blood and nutrients from the side of the fish. Generally, they don't kill the fish. Sometimes they do. This is an alewife. These guys were in huge numbers when I was younger. And periodically you would have them wash up on the beach, and there would be the stink of dead fish everywhere all along the beach. They would take huge bulldozers and plow them into giant piles and burn them, and that really reeked. But one of the reasons we brought the salmon to the Great Lakes was to reduce the alewife population, because they like to eat alewives out in the ocean. If you don't know about salmon, salmon are great big fish that live in the Great Lakes. We brought a few different variations to the Great Lakes. We brought Chinooks and cohos and a few other variations of salmon to the Great Lakes. And they've done quite well there. They might get out competed by a new invasive species, the Asian carp, in the near future, and that'd be a bummer because a lot of people like to fish for salmon, and it's a major fishing industry actually in the Great Lakes. Now, why is the salmon not an invasive species? Well, we brought it here, but it doesn't harm the environment. It actually benefits the environment. So if something is here and doesn't have a negative effect, then it's a non-native species, but it's not invasive. It's only when the effect becomes bad, it becomes an invasive species. Another example, where I went to college in Holland, they have tulip time. The tulip festival happens every year. There's millions and millions and millions of tulip plants planted everywhere. Tulips don't get out in the wild and grow on their own. They just grow kind of in little areas where you plant them. So they're not a invasive species. They can't go out and invade wetlands. They can't go out and invade forests. They pretty much just grow in gardens where you plant them, and they don't really spread. So invasive species, bad for the environment. Non-native species can be here, but not necessarily be bad for the environment.